This episode is brought to you by Betting Jobs, a leading international recruitment provider to the iGaming sector. For more information, visit www.bettingjobs.com.
As a journalist, you should be trying to ask the questions, and hence it shouldn't matter whether you get on with someone. To actually get $1 out of the business, I think you'd put your money in Kalshi and see where that goes. It's a very emotive issue. Gambling is one of the sins.
Scott, welcome to Diary of an iGaming Executive.
Hi, Robin.
Now, you talk on a daily basis to iGaming execs, the good, the bad and the ugly. Do you consider yourself to be one?
No, not at all.
Not at all. You're the first journalist we've had on. Are you a career journalist? Will you always be a career journalist?
I have nearly always been a career journalist, a career sub-editor started. And so always been writing about industries and business.
Never tempted to be in those industries, always like to be an observer? Rather.
Never tempted at all, because I don't think I'm a businessman.
Right.
That'd be the brutally honest
But you
truth.
have your own business, which we'll go on to talk about shortly.
Yeah.
Fair enough. In terms of those iGaming execs that you speak to, are you impressed by the quality of them in our industry? Or is it a mixed bag?
That's a loaded question. It's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag. You get on with some people, you get on with, don't get on with others. That's always the case. As a journalist, you should be trying to ask the questions, and hence it shouldn't matter whether you get on with someone. You obviously have better rapport with some people than others, but that's no reflection on them or indeed you. That's just the way it is when it comes to being able to interview people.
Yes, but are you impressed by the quality of the execs in this industry?
Some of them. Yeah,
mixed bag.
It's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag, and the point is my opinion doesn't count, because their performance will shine through regardless. And I do think that I think it's quite a brutal industry for weeding out those that are successful and those that know what they're doing and those that don't. And that's nothing to do with me, obviously. And I think it does. I don't know whether other industries might well be the same, but it does have that thing of people fail quite fast or succeed fast, and that's the truth about it.
And is it an industry that doesn't sort of tolerate bullshitters, or I mean, is that what you mean?
It absolutely tolerates bullshitters.
Oh, right.
Every industry tolerates bullshitters. I think.
But how do you get found out then?
Because it's just you can only do that for so long. So you can get involved. You can start your career and you can talk your way to the top, I guess, but eventually it has metrics, it's obvious metrics of success, which come down to it. Are you succeeding because is your business working or not? And if it is working, you'll get the credit for that partly, and you'll get the credit for what your team has done beneath you. And if it's not working, then you ultimately will pay the price quite quickly, I think. And it'll be quite obvious when a gambling business doesn't work, because it will be potless.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, makes sense. Well, let me put you on the spot then. I'm going to ask you to name names. If you had all the money in the world and you were investing in a gambling company, operator, supplier, whatever you want it to be, who would be on your board? Who are the people that you are impressed by that you speak to or have spoken to recently?
Well, the person I always very early on met years ago, and at Paddy Power, and was always impressed by, was Brian Corcoran. He's currently the CEO at IG. I think he's the guy that if you can say that the modern Flutter, he was the architect of the modern Flutter, I think. So I think him, and then some people around the margins, I guess. I don't know whether I'd name names in that sense, because you could, yeah.
Well, who are the people you like to listen to on earnings calls then? Who are the people that strike you as impressive?
Well, yeah. So I listen to a lot of them, and the ones that are, it's largely the American ones who know what they're doing when it comes to earnings calls, and so whether it be Bill Hornbuckle at MGM Resorts or Tom Reeg at Caesars, Jason Robbins at DraftKings, etc. They know what they're doing when it comes to earnings calls, and you can hear a certain professionalism in how they manage the questions from the analysts, how they manage the messaging. They know what they're doing when they go into the call, and they know the message they want to get out, and they're very impressive at that. But I don't necessarily speak to Jason Robbins or indeed the other two I mentioned, but I listen to them. But yeah, they're good. They're good. They know what they're doing. It's very professional. Sometimes with the UK listed companies, that's not the case.
No, interesting. Which we'll go on to talk about the difference to the American market and the European market shortly. But obviously, in terms of those earning calls, you listen into those because you produce Earnings Plus More, as well as Compliance Plus More, as part of Clear, Concise Media, your company. Why did you go down that road with Substack journalism, and what was the sort of inspiration behind that?
Substack was something I'd heard of. I think every journalist had heard of Substack a few years ago. It started to come onto the radar. In terms of a way of people distributing their content, notably a way of distributing their content for free. So it doesn't cost you anything for the platform. It only costs you if you start to charge subscriptions, and it's a really relatively minor cost. So it's pretty much easy. It's easy to get up and running with Substack, and that was on my mind for a while. And then around the time of the pandemic, things kind of changed with media a bit. And they continue to change ever since. But around the time of that, the opportunity to start a newsletter kind of came about. Substack made sense, and then the idea of concentrating purely on the earnings kind of made sense at the same time. And it felt, well, let's just try it, and that was the start of it. Yeah.
Was there a gap in the market for that finance-based journalism in our industry, do you think?
I would say there was, because otherwise Earnings More wouldn't have succeeded, if that makes sense. I don't think so. The aspect of the newsletter that I think works when it comes to earnings is that there's a lot of information that comes out of earnings calls and the earnings themselves, which is not everybody needs to know. And if you need to know exactly what's going on under the hood at MGM Resorts, you'll have to go to the earnings themselves and find out the information yourself. But there's an awful lot of information that if you're working at competitors or you're just working within the gambling sector, you kind of just want to know bits and pieces, but you don't need to know everything. So the idea of coming up with the Substack or the newsletter idea was that you provide a shortened format of this is catch up stuff on what's going on in the sector, what earnings, who's saying what, and that was how it all kind of came together. Then later, the idea of stealing from Axios, the bullet point format, just made sense. They call it smart brevity there, same as Politico. I think it's the same guy behind both of those. And the idea is that you contain as much as possible in a really relatively short amount of space. When it comes to Substack, it all kind of fits together. When it comes to Substack, most people read a Substack newsletter in their inbox on their phone. And so you've only got a certain amount of time that you're going to capture their attention, and they're going to scroll through. And so within that, you have to be quite punchy, because a long 1,500-word article doesn't work on a phone. A 500-word item, bullet-pointed item, does.
Mm-hmm. So. All part of the attention economy, as they call it, I believe.
I think it is.
Yeah. So is it of its time, do you think? Sort of captures the zeitgeist as much as
anything? It is. And it's about how you consume news. Because I think the longer term problem for all B2B journalism, and indeed most journalism, is that people don't actually visit websites to read news anymore. I don't. In my day-to-day life, I might do for work purposes, but in day-to-day life, I don't consume news via going to a website and reading a story, clicking on a story, going through and reading it. I do consume news via newsletters that get in my own inbox, and it makes sense. Your inbox is in terms of your work day, your inbox tends to be how you interact with the world, for various reasons, various aspects of your job. One of that will be keeping up with news, and you get a newsletter through. It means you don't have to leave your inbox. You can read it on the screen, and then you go straight back to your inbox and you're away. As opposed to the idea of reading a newsletter, clicking through it, taking you to a website, and then you having to find different news stories on that website to catch you up for the day. That doesn't make sense. It's too many clicks. So
the news comes to you as opposed to you having to go to the news, effectively.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which seems the modern way as well.
Yeah.
Where does that leave the traditional media in our industry or otherwise, and the advertising model around it. I mean, there obviously is an advertising model on Substack as well, and you have sponsors and people who support the newsletter. But are we moving away from that? Is there room still for that?
Well, we have moved away from it. I think the media has changed and is changing. Before we had doing this pod, but the pre-call, I do think that media is long term. There's no room for media as we know it. How long you've got and how long that pans out, I don't know, but I don't get the impression that media's got the answer to any of the questions that are being posed by the audience these days.
But there's always going to be a need, as you say, for people to consume information that helps them in their work, and that's what a summary of an earnings call or developments in the industry are all about. So
I guess in our industry, most obviously, but the way people do that is via events. So that is there now. I get that on social media you can see how people are rebelling against the idea that there are too many events, and there obviously are a lot of events. But the route to market in terms of advertising from most companies that are working on a B2B level is via the events, and they'll be seen at events and seen to be attending events and have the expos and all the rest of it. And then everything else is ancillary to the events. I think, bear in mind, some of the biggest companies in our space in terms of the media companies are events companies, and the media is attached to that, not the other way around.
You described earnings plus more. Is it earnings plus more? Because I always call it earnings and more. See, the plus always throws me, so I'll correct myself.
That's a design.
Is it?
Robin.
All right, thanks. Tripped over the first hurdle. Perfect. You described that as smart brevity, which I like, and I'm obviously going to steal for using on other occasions. But how would you describe the style of your writing? Because I think it's quite different to other writing within the media.
Yeah, because the smart brevity works for Axios when they're dealing with big events. They're a big news organisation. Same with Politico, it's dealing with very serious events. I'm not dealing with very serious events. I'm dealing with a gambling industry, and I know the audience isn't really interested in deep dive kind of big journalism exclusives and investigative reporting and all that kind of stuff. I don't think they're particularly interested in that. I think they want to have a gloss. What's happening in the industry? And when you're doing that, or when you're producing content that's designed to be brief, you want to kind of make it more interesting than would otherwise be. Something that just says, here's your data catch up is not really going to entice people. So you have to come up with something more interesting to entice them on that basis, to get them to read the thing. And so therefore the subheads become really important, because that becomes the editorial layer on top of just basic information. Yeah,
and there's a certain irreverency to the way you write about serious matters. Because I don't. You talk about serious stuff because we're talking about the finances of the industry as much as anything, or compliance stuff on the other side. But you don't take yourself too seriously when you're doing it. No. Is that to everyone's taste, or don't you care?
Nothing I can do about it. That's the equivalent of saying I don't care. But I that's just the way I do it, the way I write, the way I treat my job. I'm very serious about my job, but I'm also aware that it can get very boring, and it's an industry which it can tend towards the boring. Let's put it that way. It doesn't have to be. So you can make reading about the industry more lively than that. Yeah. So I try that. It is irreverent, I guess. I certainly have been accused of that, and I apologise to people whenever we go over the line. I don't think we do. I don't think I go over the line all that often, but when it happens, I blame the sub-editor.
So don't we all? Is there a strain within your readership then that quite enjoy it when you're poking fun at other people, but not at them, kind of thing? I suppose that's life generally. But have you had complaints? Is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, but not complaints that you'd. Not complaints about the way that somebody's treated. We're never unfair. We don't editorialize around what people say. Put it that way. We put the quote in there, And
it's just those intros.
It might be the intros, but that is editorializing. But you can't complain if you say you've used a lyric from, like today it's a Justin Timberlake song, and if you want to complain that you've got a lyric next to your quote, you're not going to look smart. I think if you complain about that, I think it's more obvious when the headlines to the main headlines to the newsletter are, that's the main spin. That's where we do spin. And that's where you kind of, there's always a fine line. You're trying to get people to notice. The point about it is the main headline is what you see in the inbox, and that's what's going to make you click through to the rest of the newsletter. And that has to be short and snappy, I think, and has to engage immediately. And you have to bear in mind what you're seeing in your Gmail inbox is just the 2 words of a headline and then the half a sentence for the subhead, which will let you know what the subject matter of the thing is going to be. Those 2 words are the thing that's going to attract your attention. So if you can get people to see it and go, okay, that's fine, I'll read that. I think Monday's one was loan sharks, and that is going to get attention, even if it's a bit tenuous to the story about Bally's Intralot. But it will get people reading it. And I don't think Bally's Intralot are going to come to me and say, you've used a headline which is wrong, because it's not wrong, it's just my interpretation of what they've done.
Nothing more clickbait than something that mentions a shark.
Yes.
Where do you get the inspiration for the quotes and the intros? Because I read it on a daily basis, Earnings and More, and obviously Compliance and More as well. And I love the irreverence and I like the humour, and I'm sure a lot of people do as well. But I fear for you that you're going to run out of ideas and run out of song lyrics to put in.
I mean, I don't know whether you see the amount of songs that are being added to Spotify every day.
Yeah.
It's that.
How do you find them? I mean,
it's always going to be. Once you're in that idea, once you have that idea that maybe you can raid a song's lyrics to help you describe a story. Once you're in that kind of, that's the thought, the original thought, and that goes back a long time to do that. Then it's just a matter of going through your own memory of songs that you've heard and go, well, actually that fits with that idea or that idea. And when you do a search on that basis, you can find the song lyrics, and it's from that. It's an obvious thing that if you listen to music, you can put songs to any news if you want to.
I guess so.
And that's the kind of, that's what, in short. I mean, there's other aspects to it, and it is a matter of if you're writing a story, you're sitting with it for a good few hours, looking at analyst notes or quotes that people have said. You're trying to work out what the lead is. And when you've got that lead, it'll often be about trying to find the headline around that lead. So when you think of the headline or think something of a headline, that might suggest a song title, that might suggest a current saying or a film title or something. And from that, you then narrow down then you start to do a kind of a reverse on the story to make sure you've got the lead and it folds down.
Got it. Right. That's the magic behind it all, is it? Yeah.
It's the blood, sweat and tears of daily journalism.
You missed toil, but yes, good. Blood, sweat, tears and toil. We've talked about a few of the companies already, but obviously a lot of the focus for both newsletters is the US.
Yeah.
Now, you and I have been in the industry long enough to have remembered, a time when the US was less of a leader in the field, shall we say, particularly when it comes to online gambling. But when PASPA was revoked, I remember a lot of people thinking, I was probably one of them, that it was going to be a huge gold rush for not just European operators, but suppliers as well. It was only a matter of time before Bet365 took over, the US and what have you. It's not worked out like that. It's in fact been the opposite. And would you agree that the States is now the centre of change and the centre of innovation, whereas Europe used to be that, as things reversed?
There's no doubt. Yeah, it's not just. It's obviously the centre of gravity in the industry moved across the Atlantic in 2018, as you say. and didn't come back. And then a lot of talent from Europe went across and still is to an extent there, or still going across to a certain extent. So there was a lot of what we see, I guess a lot of what Americans see of their betting industry. It does have has a European flavour to it. It's as simple as that. The apps that people are using in the States are pretty much based on the European model of what a sports betting app would look like, or indeed an iCasino app. But gently, at first, maybe it's starting to speed up. There has been change even in terms of what people are seeing, and suddenly we're talking about parlays when we had combination bets before, or accumulators with those
language is completely changed.
Well, yeah, those of us who used to go into betting shops and would put 7 horses down and call it an accumulator. That's now a parlay, apparently. But that language changed, and then we start to talk about single game parlays and stuff, and you're starting to get the language is different. That changed 2018 and increased. And then when it comes to innovation, obviously prediction markets comes out of nowhere. That could only have come out of the US, could only have come out of the situation in the US about not having federal sports betting and having state by state. It comes out of that mismatch and it takes over the world from there. And that wouldn't have happened in Europe, not in the slightest.
Why is the US different then?
For countless reasons. I mean, how long have you got almost? But in terms of betting culture, innovation culture, the regulation of gambling, the non-regulation of gambling in other areas, it's just utterly different. And it has it's a different world, genuinely a different world. And has always been that. And now it's becoming obvious. And something like prediction markets it just throws everyone.
Yeah. Innovation is the word though, isn't it? Because it's not invention, because prediction markets are effectively betting exchanges, which we've had in Europe for a long time.
That's my point of argument, I think. I think the Europeans go, this came out on Flutter's call, Peter Jackson, early doors when it came to prediction markets. So he was saying to American analysts, US analysts, and to US investors, it's just exchange betting. We've seen this before, and we don't think it's going to be as good as the OSB product we've got. And he was utterly wrong about that. And the dismissal of prediction markets turned out to be, and like I say, a lot of this is always timing and what happens in events, but it turned out to be utterly wrong about saying, well, we've got this product, we've got exchange betting, and this is what it is, and it doesn't mean much to us, and it doesn't mean much to the global TAM, et cetera, et cetera. And they were utterly wrong, I think. I think they would probably admit that, or the way that they dismissed prediction markets. And to a certain extent, DraftKings, Jason Robbins kind of said the same thing, but swiftly changed when they realised what Kalshi was doing, and they've had to switch. And now you've got a situation where Kalshi is likely worth, notionally as a private company, but it's likely worth more than each of them.
It's extraordinary just how the industry has been blindsided by change, isn't it, really?
Yeah. And it's that thing of why they thought, I think there was an aspect of post 2018. I think they thought, well, this is the new sector, and this is what it's going to be like, and we're just going to grow from here, and the TAM will grow, and states will open up by rote, bang, bang, bang. That didn't happen, and then in that kind of weird vacuum in states like Texas and California, that's where prediction markets came out of that. And so it did blindside people, but it shouldn't have. All this is hindsight, and I'm the best at 2020 hindsight.
Not we all.
But in hindsight, it was obvious that the anomaly of having the biggest states without OSB or iCasino was always going to be sitting there, and like, here's markets that you can go into with betting products that are open if you've come up with the right product idea.
So a few years ago, people were complaining about the rate of change and the rate of regulation. And as you say, a few states have actually now got iCasino, a few more have got a sports book. But then there was that slowdown and there was the pushback and what have you. So obviously it's now a federal model, Kalshi's. But isn't Kalshi and aren't companies like Kalshi ahead of the regulator and ahead of states who are looking to tax and what have you? And isn't that ultimately going to end in a problem around regulation and compliance, or
potentially? But I'm not the right person to speak to regarding federal versus state.
No,
but simple as that. So I've got no idea whether Kalshi's arguments will hold water in the long term. But I know that in the short term they've succeeded in establishing a foothold. More than a foothold, they've got a monopoly in a certain market, which is growing at a pace that the online sports bettors are looking at it going, well, hang on, where's this come from? And it's outpacing them, and they've got a monopoly in that market, and that is extraordinary. But whether that gets pulled back by a change in the regulations, whether or not the Supreme Court at some point decides against sports betting, sports events contracts, or completely the opposite, whether it decides in favour of that, I've got no idea. But the fact is that if your whole strategy is based around waiting for the Supreme Court to say something, then I think your strategy is probably wrong.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah. The alternative is the hunter becomes the hunted and someone comes after Kalshi's lunch with more innovation or further innovation.
That could happen, and possibly, that's absolutely a possibility. But at the moment, they're on a tear, and I don't see anyone being able to stop them from where they are. And I don't think this is a bit more tendentious. I'm not in the market, I wouldn't know, but I don't think anybody's going to compete with them successfully.
Interesting. You talked about a very successful company there, but there are plenty of successful companies in iGaming. If you had all the cash in the world, who would you be investing in?
Oh.
Or who's the next big thing, or who do you think's got an opportunity? Are you an investor?
I'm not an investor in the industry, so no, I wouldn't naturally put my money in the industry. Actually.
All right, I've just given you a blank check.
But if give me a blank check, at the moment, I think you would probably want to be getting a piece of Kalshi, as simple as that, and by hook or by crook, and go that route. I think there are companies which are doing good things in the space, much smaller than that. But yeah, I think it's at the moment to actually get a dollar out of the business. I think you'd put your money in Kalshi and see where that goes. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a fairly obvious answer, but I think it's a good answer too, because they are doing well. Speaking of sort of regulation and then the compliance side of things, I guess, where are you on the whole cryptocurrency and crypto casinos and what have you? Do you see that as a future for the industry, the future for the industry? Is it?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. And one of the things around predictions and around Kalshi is what they've done is largely they've taken the oxygen away from crypto trading in the US in a sense. And I don't think it's a coincidence that crypto trading is going through something of a lull at the same time that prediction markets is booming. So I don't think the assumption that crypto trading was that's going to take over the world. I don't think that's necessarily the case. When it comes to crypto I don't know. Crypto as a form of payment, doesn't really feel quite there. Stablecoins potentially. I don't really understand stablecoins.
Has it got a mainstream future, do you think?
Well, stablecoins are mainstream. Yeah. So yes, and what will be the case?
Mass adoption is what I mean.
Yeah, what will be the case is that the gambling regulators will have to catch up with mass adoption of stablecoins in the rest of people's lives. I think in Europe and certainly in the UK, you get used to the idea that payments is frictionless already, and you kind of go, well, what's the deal with frictionless payments? That's not the case everywhere else. So frictionless payments are are obviously the way forward. Stablecoins are going to be one of those means. Stablecoins, obviously, I say obviously, but stablecoins allow for easy transfer of crypto as a rule, and therefore, I think gambling regulators are going to have to grapple with how do we introduce or allow for stablecoin payment systems, because all the big payment companies are already going down that path, i.e. PaySafe and the rest of them.
Yeah. All right. Let's change pace. Talked about the industry a little bit. Let's talk about you. According to LinkedIn, you've been a journalist since 2020.
That's a lie.
Is it? Yeah. All right. Well, I was going to ask you, how did you get into journalism in the first place? And what did you do before?
If I'd just been a journalist for 6 years, I'd be happy.
Oh, right. Okay. There you go.
No, I got into journalism when I was at the turn of the millennium. Yeah. And I got in via being a sub-editor and in investment magazines.
Maybe it said 2020.
I'm sure it did.
No,
it said 2000. I would have said it. I would have said it probably. Yes. But that then again, I don't pay much attention to my LinkedIn.
No, notice.
True.
Yeah.
So I've been a journalist since the turn of the millennium.
And always in gambling, or
not always in gambling. Originally investment and personal investment in particular. And I worked for magazines which are no longer in existence, and then finally got into the gambling sector, fell into the gambling sector and never crawled out.
Mm-hmm. And are you a gambler? Were you attracted to the gambling industry? Was it just a job that came up? And
attracted to the industry, I think that's fair to say. Not really a big time gambler. I did a bit of betting on the horse racing and fancied myself as knowing something about horse racing, and then went to Cheltenham and realised I knew absolutely nothing.
You won't be the first, won't be the last.
But anyway, vaguely into horse race betting, and now I don't think I gamble at all. But there's an obvious point. You know, if you're working in the gambling industry, you know that gambling companies work because they win all the time, and therefore, you know, why do you think that you're going to be different? Any different to that?
Yeah, fair point. Do you like the industry? Is it?
Yeah, I like a lot of people in the industry. I've got to know a lot of people in the industry, and I like the industry, and it's fun, and it gets because of the nature of gambling and because of the nature of how gambling hits the headlines, it gets more exposure than other comparatively sized sectors. So it can be fun, and you get to write about stuff. You get to write about stuff which you wouldn't get to write about if you're writing about paper and packaging.
Yeah, true. But in terms of hitting the headlines, it only ever seems these days, or maybe it's just me being paranoid, but it only ever seems to hit the negative headlines. Yeah. You don't seem to get, well, there was the exception recently with a guy who unearthed a time capsule and bet on a horse called Christmas Day that he, was in this time capsule, etc., and it won at Epsom the other day. But those sort of stories seem to be few and far between these days. It just feels like everyone's got it in for us.
Yeah, and that's one of the stories I've been following throughout my career, is the particularly the UK industries and its problems with various lobbying groups, notably around groups that have been funded by or are allied to Derek Webb, and the various people around that. Gambling with Lives, the lobbying around FOB-Ts back in the day, now the lobbying around online, the lobbying around advertising, gambling advertising. I've been following that for a long time with the help of some very good contacts who know precisely what's going on. There's a reason why it's surrounded by bad headlines, to be honest. And that's because there are bad actors in the gambling space, I think would be the best way to put it. But it's also because it's a very emotive issue. Gambling is one of the sins, as they say, and the sin stocks, and it's like tobacco and booze. And I don't think the industry has covered itself in glory when it comes to stating its case. But that said, it's up against some particularly vociferous And underhand opposition, I think, would be the fair way.
Do you ever hide your light under a bushel when you're talking to people that you don't know? When you introduce yourself, do you just say you're a journalist and don't say which industry you're in?
Yeah, you kind of judge your audience sometimes, don't you? So my fallback is, I'm a business journalist.
Yeah.
And then if they press, I'll say, well, I cover the gambling industry, and you judge from their facial expression whether you carry on with that conversation or move on.
Yeah. You mentioned your career earlier. Obviously, you were editor at EGR magazine. Yeah. When I came into the industry in terms of doing PR and marketing, EGR was the gold standard. Do you think it's still the gold standard, or is it a bit like Man United and other people have caught them up?
I think that's a bit harsh on EGR. I don't think that they're not the fallen giant. There's some great journalists there. Joe Levy is really good, and so yeah, I think they are the Man United in the sense that they've got the longest pedigree, but they've consistently produced. When you said earlier about the changing media landscape, I was noticed that the way that they're changing as a business. I think they've got rid of actually producing a actual magazine.
They have. They've got a podcast as well, I believe.
And now they're moving into podcasts, and so they're changing as a industry. They seem to be changing more than most at the moment, I think. And it feels like they've got. I think it's Julian is heading it up, and I think that they're doing stuff which is really interesting and really good. Yeah.
As a journalist in this industry, which journalists do you read? Which publications do you read, and who do you go to for your news?
I tend to read all of them for obvious reasons, but the ones that are, and I read Joe Levy's stuff. I read Zach's stuff at Next. There's and Robin at IGB.
Harrison.
Yeah, Harrison. So there's a good few journalists out there that are worth reading, and then you've got the whole slew of American journalists. So In-Game they've got some very good people writing some stuff, and then there's Dustin Gauker's newsletters, and Steve Ruddock's newsletter. Read those, and there's other various people who are on Substack actually who've popped up who produce bits and pieces. Vaughan Lewis has started producing a Substack, which is very interesting because it comes from a different perspective. That definitely comes from a perspective of somebody who hasn't been in the industry. And there's others, yeah. So there's more journalism out there than there was years ago, I think. Certainly when I was at EGR, and then subsequently at Gambling Compliance, there's that much more being written about the sector,
and different forms of consuming that,
and via different forms. And there might not be the magazines that there were, but there's more being written online.
Yeah,
and obviously there's more events that are going on, so there's more stuff coming from those events, more content coming from those events.
Before this pod, you and I had a conversation, and I lazily suggested that the journalism in this industry might not be quite as good as it used to be. You were quite vociferous in your denial. I had no evidence. What is yours?
Well, the very fact of the proliferation of online sources, there's a lot more content out there, and next to producing a lot of stories, EGR produced a lot of stories, IGB produces a lot of stories. There's a lot of stuff being written by Dustin Gauker and Steve Ruddock. In-Game produces a huge amount of stories. There's even a thing called Prediction News, which is now producing stories. And they're good stories. There's lots of news out there. There's a lot of exclusives. People are coming up with exclusive stories every day, pretty much. That wasn't the case years ago, I think, when I was at Gambling Compliance and stuff like that. The pace of change means that there's a lot more being written about the sector. So,
and as for pay-to-play kind of content in the industry media, does that cheapen journalism? Does it cheapen the publications, or am I being slightly naive about how B2B media works?
I doubt you're being naive about how B2B media works, because you're right in the heart of how B2B media works. I don't come across it myself. Obviously, you get very rare inquiries saying, "Can we get some content in the newsletter?" And it's like, of course, I say how much. No, but you don't. I don't. And the thing is, there used to be the case that there would be paid for sections in magazines, of course, in the editions of the magazines, and that's just not there anymore. So, and you do see sponsored content on the IGB. They'll title it sponsored content. I think probably the same with everybody else. They produce sponsored content. My point with sponsored content is the minute you see that as a headline for a piece, nobody's going to read it. It's only the marketing people who are going to read it. And they just need to say to their boss, well, we've got this double, back in the day, we got this double page spread in EGR and it would be a paid for piece. Now it's like, well, we've got this item on, it's sitting on the front page at IGB and it says sponsored content. And they said to their boss, well, we got the front page with our product and nobody reads it. I don't get why marketing people still think that paid for content has got any purchase in the sector, but
surely all publications, B2B publications, need a form of that to put the lights on and pay people's salaries.
Yeah, and I get that. And
you're being a bit puritanical about that.
Well, a bit, but also the point being that I'm trying to provide content that people are going to read, and the metrics that my Substack will show me is how many people are clicking on or reading content and clicking onto the newsletter. And within that, obviously, there's the sponsored appearances, and that's advertising, obviously, and it's top and bottom of all of the newsletters, and that is the way that I survive economically. But if the content is then also written by the advertiser, you won't get the click-throughs because people go, oh, that's not the interesting stuff. So you have to find that fine line. It is about, to an extent, it's about threading the needle on making sure that the content works as a piece of editorial, and then subsequently making sure it works as it can pay for itself. And it has to be that balance of you stick the content about the industry next to the people who are trying to make money within the industry. And I think with the online websites, the problem that they have is that they're trying to do the same thing, but nobody's visiting a website. And therefore, it used to be this issue about ad blindness. You could read an article and not realize that there was an advert next to it. Now, they're not even reading the article online. So you have to reach the audience where the audience is. And my argument is you're reaching the audience via their inbox. That's how you reach them. And how you reach them is via being associated with a brand which people are reading. So paid for content doesn't work in that environment, I don't think. Because why would you read a newsletter that is just a advert? It's that thing of discuss. I get an awful lot of emails of companies where I've signed up, not just in gambling sector, but generally. When you get adverts, when you get content in your inbox, which is just effectively spam, you obviously just click it straight out of your box and you don't read it. So my sell to sponsors is I try my best via what we discussed about the content to get people to click onto an email and to read it, and they will see your name. They might not click through to your name, and it might just be by association, but that's what I offer. And if you buy into that, then great. If you don't buy into that, there are other ways.
Yeah, makes sense. Fair enough. Does journalism in general, but specifically about in our media, obviously, does it have a bright future with AI?
Probably not.
Are you replaceable?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, all journalists are. I think they know it as well.
Aren't you doing a form of AI because you're distilling down information from other sources into one? You're effectively your own AI, aren't you? So but you're adding a human spin that will not be replaced, surely.
Well,
I'm trying to be more optimistic.
I'm adding a degree of knowledge that is not instantly replaceable by AI. But the problem with AI, in terms of saying, if you said, well, this is as far as it gets in terms of AI's capabilities, great. we can all live with that. We can all still carry on with our jobs, and there is an upside. But AI is not stopping, and so my fears around AI where AI goes in 1, 2, 3 years time, 5 years time, and beyond that, I've got no idea. I'm not an expert on AI, but I've seen the advances we've all seen the advances in the last 2 years in terms of what AI is capable of. And I think to a certain extent, a lot of us have kind of jaw drop moment of like, wow, it's doing that now. And then what it's going to do in the future, I don't see how journalism will compete because of the amount of money that's being thrown into AI to make AI the way that we interact with the world.
You don't think there's a push and pull in history where we go towards something and then we pull back from something, and people will accentuate and will be proud of human intelligence rather than artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I think there's hope. I mean, AI is a hugely useful tool when it comes to, compared to how you used to use the internet. If you go back to the days of search, and that was only 5 years ago, but you go back to the way that we use search and the way you use AI in comparison is a world apart. And the nature of what it gives you as a response versus what you got from a list of websites, it's just a different planet. And that's great, actually. How you can use AI is great, but it's not stopping there. And what it's going to do beyond that, if it can do an awful lot, but it can't replace it hasn't replaced human intelligence yet. Yeah.
So what are you going to do in 5 years' time then?
There's always jobs as bin men.
Plumber. Everyone talks about plumbers and electricians.
I'm not smart enough to be a plumber or an electrician. I'd kill myself if I was an electrician. But from what I've seen of the bin men, I can do that job.
Yeah. Those data centers aren't going to wire themselves. That's all I'm saying. So I'll do that if you're a bin man.
Okay.
Perfect. Going back to the content and the sort of PR side of the industry and what have you, you must see some terrible mistakes from PR people like me.
Couldn't possibly comment.
In terms of, yes, well, you are going to comment because that's what I'm asking you about. In terms of, people approaching journalists in this industry with stuff that they want to get placed or information they want to get into the media. What are the common mistakes and what could people do better from a PR point of view, do you think?
Yeah. I think that I don't think PR is you're in a difficult business. You're in a worse business than we are because you've got the interface of having to speak to people directly about their business and then trying to go out and sell it, and in some way or shape or form. Every journalist will say, "Well, I've had it with PR people getting in touch with me." But there is it is obviously a symbiotic relationship. And some bits of information that are sent out by PRs are better than others, put it that way. Square in the air, it's not a monopoly. I'm sure you would fight against that reaction. Yeah. But you send out there's a lot of PR stuff that you put out where and I remember having spoken to Lena a while back. I was saying, I don't think I'm getting your press release. She said, I'll check. And she said, you don't appear to be on the list. Do you want me to add you to the full list and beware? And you do get a lot of stuff every day, which will be new game X, new game that. I don't know who that is necessarily aimed at because I'm not going to use that. And I'm not sure that any of the major outlets within the space use that kind of stuff. And I'm sure there's the company wants to say, well, we've got a new phishing game, or we've got a new crash game. I understand that they want to get that out, but that I don't see how producing a press release around that is going to necessarily get that any attention. The other work that all the agencies do, which is about talking to journalists and trying to discuss a company and what's happening, that's more interesting. And if you're having a conversation with anybody from your business or any of the other businesses, and the conversation is about what a company is actually doing, what's happening here, what's their view on that. That can be better. And it's always better if you can speak to a company directly, obviously. So, and all agencies work as that way of providing the direction where you can arrange for a call. And once you're speaking to a company directly, that's often the best way, or speaking to an executive, that's obviously the best way to get information out.
Makes sense. Fair enough. I'll take that on board. Thank you. You're normally the interviewer. How does it feel to be interviewed?
Oh, I hate it. Yeah, I hate it.
Why is that?
Just because suddenly you've got the spotlight on you. I've done the not for podcasts, but I've certainly done stuff at events where you're the person coming up with the questions. And as long as you don't run out of questions, which can be problematic depending on how long the answers have been, but as long as you don't run out of questions, your job is easy because you just say, this is the question. What do you think? And then you immediately throw the spotlight onto the person. But answering questions is really hard.
Will you always prefer to be an observer and a commentator on rather than a contributor too?
I think so. Yeah.
Is that just you naturally as a person, or?
I think so. Yeah.
Fair enough.
I think so.
At this time of the podcast, we always finish with 3 questions, which are not industry related, but they are hopefully something that gives people a bit of an understanding into your character and what have you. I couldn't help but notice on your WhatsApp, the picture on your WhatsApp is Sweep of Sooty and Sweep fame with an electric guitar. So I'm guessing music is, and we've already talked about references in your newsletters, but I'm guessing music is big for you.
It is.
If I was to put you on the spot and to ask you to name a sort of favourite musician or band or DJ, whoever it might be, who would you want to listen to?
Oh God. That is completely on spot. I just listen to, I'm sure like everyone, I listen to a lot of music on Spotify, and I put together playlists and just listen to whatever. I was listening to Earth, Wind and Fire this morning.
Right.
I mean, that's, they
wouldn't be your go-to though, would they? They just happen to be, or
wouldn't necessarily be my go-to, but you can listen to I Am endlessly, actually, and I have listened to it endlessly whilst I vaguely jog. I don't run. I vaguely jog and do park runs occasionally, and you can listen to I Am by Earth, Wind and Fire when you're running park run, and it will make you feel good about life, which is surely what the whole point is.
Definitely, yeah. I've asked that question to 101 different people and never had the same answer yet. So that's
I'm not surprised.
No one said Earth, Wind and Fire.
Because the problem with if you were into music, you're into 15 different albums that month, and you don't want to highlight. And also, there is also that thing. Obviously, when you say to music, you've got to be trying I don't want to be too obvious.
Yeah,
but I also don't want to be too obscure.
Yeah, so that makes you a muso. That makes someone who thinks about their musical choices rather than actually just listening to music. But yeah, fair enough. 6 music. Presumably you listen to 6 music a lot.
Well, yes, no, but realise it's false. And I think there's a thing that most of its audience is based in Brighton, and most of it works in graphic design, isn't it? I think that's
that would make sense. All right, another one to put you on the spot. Whether you're listening to this music at the same time or not is up to you. But what would your last meal on earth be? What would you like to eat?
It'd probably be, and it probably will be, a curry at Tyab's in Whitechapel.
Okay, right. Curry, interesting. Is it a particular kind of curry, or is it
Tyab's?
Tyab's, right.
Very specifically Tyab's. They got their dry meat, which is fantastic.
Okay.
And their lamb chops, which absolutely brilliant.
Very good, very good. All right, and last but not least, if you had a piece of advice for the next generation of iGaming executives, what would it be?
Treat a journalist kindly. Just shoot for the moon. Just try and be American for a start, and try and think like they do. That's surely the route to being a success in the gambling sector.
Quite possibly. Scott, I appreciate you've been on the other side of the camera this time, or the other side of the pen, if you like. But thanks for joining us on Diary of an iGaming Exec.
You're welcome, Robert. Great.